Today I'm going to be working on a 2002 Dodge Ram 2500 with the 5.9 Cummins in it, second gen. I'm going to be replacing my hydro booster and power steering pump and my vacuum pump. So to complete this task, there's going to be 4 bolts, studs that pass through the firewall. Location of these bolts is going to be, got one there, one up there, and 2, you got one above your steering column here. Steering shaft where it passes through the firewall. Kind of hard to see, but if you got a ratcheting wrench, that'll make this job much easier. If not, it could be done with just a regular 15mm wrench. So to complete this task today, I'm going to start off by pulling all the fluid out of my brake reservoir. And I'm going to be using this Harbor Freight Holt Industries 2.3 gallon fluid extractor. This is the manual pump version. They've got multiple different options. Right, so now I've finished extracting all the fluid from the brake reservoir here. We are going to get started with taking off all these lines and removing hydro booster, which is back here. It's going to be your master cylinder and your hydro booster. You do not have to connect these. You could just kind of maneuver it out of the way, but if you're worried about damaging the lines, go ahead and pull those as well. But in this case, I'm going to try to avoid it. Just pull this one here, this one here, and this one here. Guys, I just wanted to update you here. So I've decided I have changed this hydro booster in the past and came from the local parts house, and they just tend not to have the greatest reman parts. And previously I did not remove the master cylinder, but this time I am going to do it with the master cylinder out. As you can see here, probably be best for you guys to go ahead and remove that as well. Just connects by these 2 lines, these 2 bolts, and you'll be able to get everything here free. All right, guys, finally got the hydro booster out of there. And as you can see, this probably don't have 2,000 miles on this one, and it's been leaking ever so slightly, but it's been leaking just a little bit inside my cab too, just barely, not enough to where the carpet's wet, but nonetheless, spend all that money. Last thing that you want is your carpet ruined or even a safety fail. All right, so now that I got the hydro booster out of there, this seal will not always come on the new unit. So what you gotta do is you just gotta pull that off there. It sits down in those grooves, this face part does, and orients this way, so it will open up to a cone to the firewall. So go ahead and do that. Install that on there. You're just gonna work it all the way down until you feel that it bottoms. Okay, now we got that on there. You can see how that sits. Sits on there just like that. It will wobble, wiggle a little bit, twist pretty easy. But like I said, it sits in that groove, that lip does. All right, now the next thing we're gonna have to do is remove this tag that tells you you're gonna need to swap some parts over here. You can see it's hollow at the moment. And that push rod and spring and retaining clip need to come out of here and go into the new unit, as well as in my case on the second gen, this block right here, by removing these two nuts, and you're going to mount it all onto here. Also guys, as a good rule of thumb, always try to orient things the same exact way. So you can see I've got them set up exactly the same, and as I pull the block off, I'm going to orient it exactly the way it came off of the old unit. Right now I'm going to go ahead and start working the retaining clip out, which just takes a little bit of finesse. It's almost out. And now you're just going to work each one. It looks like a star. You're going to work each one around evenly, just like so. Careful, because there's spring in there that will pop off. And just got to push rod just like that. And it orients with this piece in. This is a retaining clip that comes with it. You can see it can only go in there one way. So when I do, you see the larger part of the washer is going to face out rather than the smaller side. All right, so now that I got everything all cleaned up and inspected, make sure everything looked good, what I'm actually going to do is they put a little bit of grease on the ball end here, so that way it doesn't wear metal to metal. And I'm going to be using this disc brake caliper lube. It's for the slide pins, and it's great for this application here. All right, so once I'm done lubricating that, that's how it should look. It does not need much at all, just on the very top of that. Then you're going to place the spring on top, straight in. It's going to sit about like that, nothing special. Take our ring, like I said, larger part of the rubber is going to be out. Those fingers should lock it in place. And the way I do this is by taking a socket that's going to fit on there just like that, where the fingers have just a little bit of overhang on the socket. And I just push it on in there until it seats. And then I double check it to make sure that everything appears to be sitting right, which you see there. It's in pretty good shape. And that's all it took, was getting that together like so. Now we just gotta put it in the vehicle. All right, so here's where I kind of split off, and I am actually going to be changing out the power steering pump, vacuum pump, both of my hydraulic lines, and my steering gearbox. And the hydro booster that I'm using came from Rock Auto. I can't remember which one, but I'll link the parts in the description. Same as the power steering pump and the vacuum pump. Both came from Rock Auto as well, and I'll leave links for those in the description. And my steering gearbox came from PSC Motorsports. It is the big bore, and this will also be getting a hydraulic cylinder steering assist put on, as well as a heavy-duty T steering setup with Heim joints. So those will be in separate videos, but I'm going to continue on in this video with all of the following parts, which can be power steering pump, vacuum pump, and my steering gearbox, possibly, at the very least, my hydraulic hoses. All right, welcome back to the second part of this video series, which is going to be removal of the power steering pump. So I took these off the hydro booster end, and I have now disconnected all the lines from the back of the power steering pump here. Two of them were just worm gear clamps. The bottom one has that nut right there that you actually thread in to the bottom there, and then you disconnect them. It's hard to see from here, but from the top of the steer gear as well, which is what I am working on now. And I still got one here I have to disconnect, but we go down here. I know a lot of second gens are already running these because they're terrible steering design, which is why I am going to a heavy duty steering kit, which is gonna consist of this much larger track bar that I've got here. Runs from the frame there. I got a lift kit in this case, so I've got a drop bracket. Runs from there over to the axle. And what I'll be changing out is your drag link and tie rod on this Y steering setup, converting it to a T steering. So what you're gonna see later in a different video is the heavy link, just like this one, heavy duty link, will connect from that knuckle there to that knuckle on the bottom, and then the drag link is gonna connect as well to that knuckle. And then I'm not exactly sure yet where I'm gonna mount my hydraulic assist, but I think I'm gonna try to utilize this same location for the axle mount, and I'm waiting for the clamp to come in for my tie rod that connects the other end of my hydraulic cylinder. So right now that's where I'm at, but to get this steering gear out, we're gonna have to drop this bracket, which is just gonna be the 2 bolts over here, 2 bolts over here. In my case, I do not have a sway bar anymore, so that would come down with this. You'd have a bracket with a big old bar, which is your sway bar, that connects to the axle, helps it from swaying side to side. I take this truck off-roading a lot, so in this case I do not have a sway bar because it just stops me from flexing. So I'm gonna remove this and drop this down. It's gonna come off the end of my Pitman arm shaft there, and from there I'm gonna continue taking off my hydraulic lines and my steering linkage up there. Then I'll work on taking my drag link off of this end, and then we'll take out the bolts on the opposite side of the rail there for my steering gearbox. One thing I did forget to mention is that as long as these are done right, there are some locking screws, they're Allen heads, very short little studs that thread in around that Pitman arm shaft. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and grab your Allen wrench and loosen these. They do not need to be very tight. They basically just need to lightly lock this collar to the end of the nut that holds the pitman arm on. All right, guys, so using, if I can get it to focus here, this separator here, what it does is it actually separates the pins from inside of the tapered ends of the knuckles, shafts, all that stuff. So you would put it on like so, slip it back in there, like this, thread that down. What that'll do is that'll force it back in once you have removed the locking nut that holds it in place. And you would just thread it in until it pops. It is going to pop, make a loud sound, but it'll be separated at that point. All right, now that I have dropping down the steering gearbox here, once again, there's only 3 bolts from the outside here. And your lines, you disconnect your steering shaft right here. From your gearbox before trying to remove it, and just drop it down. And then you're ready for installation of your new steering gear. All right, so here is the steering gear that I had ordered from PSC Motorsports. And I believe it's PSC Motorsports on their website, which is a big bore steering gear, so it is much heavier than the stock one. So here is that steering gear. This shaft here, the diameter, is much larger on this PSC big bore steering gearbox. So whereas the factory one is literally just this diameter and has that size bearing, and it's much thinner, wears out much easier underneath this heavy diesel engine. This diesel engine's weighing somewhere near 1,100 pounds, not including the frame and everything else, and bouncing and all the potholes and everything else you run over. And if you take it off-roading, that's even more, and it beats that bearing up, and it just adds some play in the shaft this way, as well as tearing up the teeth inside, causing it to be able to bounce back and forth, left to right. So this is definitely going to be the way to go whenever you upgrade, if you're going to upgrade your steering on your 2nd gen diesel Cummins. Another thing about using this steering gearbox from PSC Big Bore is you need to use the supplied collars, spacers, to space it off of the frame, because it being a big bore, it's actually a much larger, well, significantly larger housing that's going to require these spacers, so it will actually sit flush to your frame rail. To make sure that there's no confusion, you're going to run your bolts through your frame rail, and these spacers are going to go to the inside, because you can see where there's the groove there for the old steering gearbox, which is where this rounds. You see how the holes sit lower than the body up here, where this one is flush. So that's the reason you're going to need to run with the new spacers supplied.